Illustration. Put the illustration up.
Oh, yeah. I thought they run the real thing. This is a single cylinder master cylinder. This is the most important part of the master cylinder. This is the primary cup, which performs the function of the master cylinder. We use pressure within the system to pressurize the system to push out the brake shoes against a revolving drum. This is the inlet port, which feeds hydraulic fluid to this part of the system at all times behind the cup. This is the column.
All right, very briefly, the last few days we've been talking about the brake system generally, and specifically what component of the brake system? Master cylinder, okay? Very quickly, we talked about its construction of the master cylinder being made of two basic materials, Bill? And another one, David? Aluminum, right, all right? We also talked about the primary purpose of the master cylinder. Brad, you remember what that was?
Apply pressure.
Right. To build pressure, apply pressure to the entire brake system, okay? Today, we're going to start the lesson plan on, or today's lesson, I should say, is going to be on the wheel cylinder. And at the end of this lesson, similar to the master cylinder, we're going to talk about its purpose, its construction. We're also going to talk about those symptoms that might require or help diagnose in what? Well, the repair of the wheel cylinder. Okay? So let's talk about the basic construction then of the wheel cylinder. By and large, the wheel cylinder is going to be made up of cast iron. Okay? You will not find many cars that will use a wheel cylinder that's constructed of aluminum. Okay? First of all, it's too expensive. Second of all, the basic size of the wheel cylinder itself does not require a weight consideration, okay? So the actual wheel cylinder itself does not weigh that much. Second of all, cast iron is stronger, all right? So its construction then primarily is of cast iron. That is an external construction. What is the purpose of the wheel cylinder? Can you tell me, Mike?
Push the brake shoes against the drum.
Okay. More specifically, that's the end result, but more specifically, what's the purpose? Jeremy? Build up pressure, right? It's a self-contained unit that allows the pressure that the master cylinder generates to hold that pressure in some manner. All right? That's its purpose. It doesn't create pressure. It holds that pressure in. Here I have on the board an illustration of the general construction that shows the interior construction of the master cylinder, or excuse me, wheel cylinder. And there's certain components like the master cylinder that I want you to become familiar with. Basically, we have the outside housing. Housing itself, okay? If you turn it on end, you'll see that it's bored out, that it has a cylinder bore, similar to the master cylinder. Yes, Jeremy?
Is that what it is?
This happens to be a 15/16, okay? The bore, its diameter is 15/16. Okay. So this then represents the housing of the wheel cylinder. Internally, we have some components that are extremely critical. Let's start with the outside. We have a device that seals the unit, and that's called what? It's called a dust boot. And the dust boot does what? Keeps outside contaminants from coming to the inside. Does it have anything to do whatsoever with pressure, David? No pressure at all, right? Strictly a cover. We have a device here, or a component. What's this called? Not the push rod. You might consider it as a push rod. It works like a push rod, but it has a specific name. You did your workbooks. You recall? Shoe links. Okay, we'll pass these out. Correct, the actuating pin.
There's this push right here.
All right. I would prefer you use the actuating pin because a push rod will get confused with another component. What might that be? Push rod and a reciprocating engine. Right. So I would like you to use the terminology of actuating pin. And these pass outs that I've just given you, you should put in your notebook under task 5 also. It's the actuating pin that comes directly in contact with what? Mike? Yes, internally it comes directly in contact with the piston, with the brake shoe over here, correct? And also over here. Working toward the center, our very next component would be what, John? What's this device here? Yeah, that's the piston itself. And the piston is designed in such a fashion, obviously it's circular, it's flat on one side, and it's concave in the other. Why would it be concave? Right, keep the actuating pin centered in the housing of the wheel cylinder. This goes in here like such, and you'll notice it's a very close fit. It fits in there rather tightly, all right? And it's machined in such a way that it's just slightly smaller than the circumference or diameter of the bore of the cylinder, all right? Is it machined so closely, though, that it can hold in hydraulic fluid? David? Yeah. Is it? Is it machined tightly enough that it would hold in fluid? You could not get fluid in there? John? No, it's not. All right? It's a very good fit, but it's not a perfect fit. What do we need then to seal that?
The cups.
Okay, which is the very next component.
All the cups are they primary?
Okay, when we talk about primary cups, what component are we talking about? In the master cylinder, okay? These are just wheel cylinder cups. It's the cup. Yes, Jeremy?
If you pour out a wheel cylinder, how far will the cups?
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit later, all right? Right now we want to identify the components, and then we'll identify some of the malfunctions that we should look for and how we can rectify that problem. Any other questions up to this point? Okay. Coming further to the interior or the inside of the wheel cylinder, we have in this illustration what? The
Cup.
It's a spring. Okay. Hold on to that thought. It's not a cup expander. No. How about the return spring? Okay? It's the return spring itself, and it's a device that looks exactly like this. Okay, it's a little coil spring. It does not have a great deal of tension on it, but it has enough tension to do what? Keep them apart. Yes, keep what apart? Yeah, keep the cups and pistons back to its at its at-rest position. Okay. In your illustration, in the handout that I gave you, there's something called the cup expander, which by drawing does not allow me to show here, but it goes between the cup and the spring, and primarily all it does is fit the cup in such a manner that it will keep equal pressure on the sides of the wheel cylinder cup, so that the cup is ensured that it will do what? Hold the fluid in, okay? So my earlier question was, even though the piston is machined properly and is a good tight fit, it is not sufficient in and by itself to keep the fluid from running from here to the outside. All right? Now you're in the very middle of the wheel cylinder. You have a mirror effect on the rest of the wheel cylinder. Whatever is over here is on this side also. And if you'll take notice, you'll have two of everything except the return spring. All right? You've got the return spring and the cup expander. The very next thing you'd want in there is the cup itself. What's the next component that goes in there? Piston. What would be next? Dust boot or the pin. You can put either one in. If I take a typical wheel cylinder repair kit, dust boot looks like so. It's like this, and fits over the end of the wheel cylinder. Okay? Like that. It seals the dust, dirt from getting inside. On the illustration that I have in the board, there's one vital component that's missing. A bleeder screw. John, can you tell me what that does?
That's what you loosen to move the air from the system.
Exactly. All right. It's a little threaded plug that you can unscrew in a counterclockwise fashion. If you unscrew it and there's fluid in the system, what's going to happen?
If you pump the brakes, will push
Right.
the air out.
And even if you don't pump the brakes, what will happen?
The pressure will be released,
Gravity,
pushes the air out.
acting against the entire brake system, the hydraulic system, will push fluid out through the bleeder screw. Here we have a line coming in, central, positioned centrally in the wheel cylinder. What does that line carry? That's the brake line. Carries the brake fluid through the line into the wheel cylinder. Just like the master cylinder and its cylinder, the brake fluid is accumulated internally. However, since this doesn't create pressure, it allows the pressure that builds up to go how many directions, David? Just one direction? The pressure is applied through the line like so. It comes into the center of the wheel cylinder, and then what happens, Mike? It pushes the pistons out in this direction. Now, let's talk about, let's try to recall what we said about hydraulics. If I move the brake pedal 1/4 inch, what happens in the system, Mike? Everything else in the system moves 1/4 inch. Is that right? That's right. Bill, everybody agree? So if I move the brake pedal at the very beginning of the brake system 1/4 inch, and it pushes the fluid ahead of it 1/4 inch, these cups, and hence what? The pistons will move 1/4 inch. The pins will move 1/4 inch. And the pins are attached to what, Bobby? The brake shoes. They'll move 1/4 inch. And the brake shoes come in contact with what, Jeremy? The rotating brake drum. And it puts pressure against the brake drum. And the ultimate objective is achieved now. The car now comes to a halt. Okay? As I release the brake pedal, what now is going to happen?
The pistons will track back to its old position.
The pistons and hence the cups will retract back to its old position, right? Its original position. All right? What's going to help return that fluid, Jeremy? The retracting springs that are attached, if you look in the illustration that I handed you, the brake shoes have return springs. Those return springs pull the brake shoes back against the pin. Now remember, we're still talking about a closed hydraulic system. So if this shoe returns this pin back 1/4 inch, what's going to happen in here? Bill? The fluid has to move backward. Where does it go? Back up through the line, back into the master cylinder housing. You recall this housing here. There's a port that allows that fluid then to return to what? The reservoir of the master cylinder. Okay? What then is the purpose of the bleed screw? Jeremy? Okay, to remove air from about the system. Okay? Is it conceivable that air could get into the system? Okay, how would that happen? Mike?
Air bubbles will get in the reservoir tank of the master cylinder.
If you allowed the reservoir to go too low, right? And then you added fluid. The fluid is going to do what? Push the air ahead of it into the system, right? You want to get that system out. I mean, you want to get that air out of the system. Because air compresses and hydraulic fluid does not. Therefore, you would get the effect of a spongy pedal. So you would want to be able to remove any air that's in this portion of the system with this bleed screw. Now, my illustration is poor because when I pass this around for you to look at, you'll notice that the bleed screw is right in line with what? Where the brake line comes in. It has to be centrally located in the wheel cylinder housing. Okay? Any questions about this? This is, again, construction. We talked about its purpose. Talked about now the construction and how it works. No questions? Jeremy? What keeps the spring central? Okay. Not the expanders, because the expanders do nothing more. They do nothing more than fit perfectly inside the cup. Right? What keeps it central is visualize, or if you cannot visualize, look at your pass out. You'll notice that the brake shoes, when they're installed properly, are contained by what? What keeps the brake shoes positioned, John? The springs, right. And what keeps them contained? The drum itself. The drum only allows it to go out so far. So you centralize those brake shoes, all right? The pins are going to center themselves correctly in the wheel cylinder.
What keeps the spring up? The return spring. In the middle there.
What keeps it in the middle? That's what I'm attempting to explain here. If this is in 1 inch and this is in 1 inch, this has to be in the middle, because these are all equal sizes, are they not? Yes, Mike?
The spring, the primary cup is fits right here with the spring, right? It's not in there very
Well,
tight. Is it in there tight though?
It comes, I guess I don't understand your question.
So I'm saying if the pistons move back to push the brake shoes against the drum,
As they expand,
what keeps the spring from pulling off of the primary cup from the cup?
what does keep the spring from coming off? The tension on the spring and the housing itself. It can't go in any direction except back and forth, right? I have the cup, oh, there I go, yeah. I have the cup inside here. I have the spring here. I have another cup on this side. There's only so much room in there for so many parts, okay? There's the piston, and there's the other piston. When I bring those pistons together, there's only so much room in there. Where's the spring going to go? Nowhere. All I can do is go back and forth, all right? If, oh, it fits perfectly in the retainer. Yeah. Now, not all wheel cylinders have retainers. Okay. Sometimes the spring will come directly in contact with the cup.
That means they don't all have cup expanders?
Right. Early design ones did not have cup expanders. Yes.
So do the pistons move at the same time?
Yes. Exactly. Remember the principle of hydraulics? If you move a 1/4 inch this way, if this is centrally located in the wheel cylinder, this will move a 1/4 inch, and that will move a 1/4 inch. Okay? What happens if one moves and the other doesn't?
And only one shoe goes to the drum?
Yeah, then only one brake shoe is going to go against the drum, and what's going to be your symptom? Not brake fade. Poor stopping on one wheel and great stopping on the other. What's going to happen?
You gotta shift.
The car is going to shift, okay, either one direction or the other. If you don't have each rear wheel working in unison together, one wheel is going to be more efficient in braking than the other, right? Okay, so we're driving down the road and we apply the brakes and the right rear wheel grabs and the left one doesn't, right? What's going to happen? The back end's going to kick out. Which way? It's going to kick to the left. stopping the car, the left one is not. The right one's locking up, the left one isn't, it's going to want to go this way. Yeah, the front of the car will go toward the right, but the rear end will come out to the left. Now we've gone right from construction already into symptoms of a malfunction. Yes, Jerry?
I understand the principle, you know, that move the quarter and everything else is the quarter. If that's centrally located, wouldn't it divide up the pressure?
Can anybody answer that? Jeremy's question was, even though this is centrally located, and the pressure comes in and it's centrally located, isn't the pressure divided up by half? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Why isn't it? Can anybody answer that for me? It goes back to the very first thing we talked about, the principles of hydraulics. It's undiminished. Exactly. Undiminished. It pushes equally as hard this way as it does that way. It even pushes this way. But this can't move, can it? The walls of the cylinder can't expand. The only
every molecule
molecule that's in here moves a quarter inch.
so it'll push both sides.
Since it can't move, since it doesn't have enough pressure to push against the wall of the housing, what is it going to move? The least resistance, right? That's the cups and the piston, and hence the brake shoes. Okay? So we've already discovered one symptom of a malfunctioning wheel cylinder. And what is that, Bill? What is one symptom now of a malfunctioning wheel cylinder that we just discovered accidentally? Someone asked a question. Right, if only one piston moves and the other one stays stuck, we now have an inefficient wheel cylinder. And how would you fix it, of course? Either one of the cups are bad, or one of the pistons is corroded and it's stuck in the housing and it can't what? Can't move. All right? No matter how much pressure you exert on it, it can't move. And now you've lost the efficiency of this particular unit. I've taken wheel cylinders apart whereby either rust or corrosion has bonded this piston to the walls of the wheel cylinder. In fact, most of the time when that occurs, both pistons will be corroded and stuck. Now what happens?
Loss of braking in that one.
Loss of braking in that wheel, and now you get really hard wheel pull. Usually what happens is the left rear, if it's not functioning properly, or the right rear for that matter, will actually allow the other side to lock up. If the left rear isn't working, then the right rear wheel puts all the pressure on that one side, the wheel locks up, and again your car is going to want to come around. So we have the same symptom and the same diagnosis. Mike, you look perplexed.
Yeah. If that one doesn't work, neither piston's moved.
Neither piston moves.
And you're pushing down on the pedal, where's all the fluid going to go through that cylinder?
It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays right there. If this thing is corroded,
So we just send more fluid to the other wheel cylinder.
well, it would allow, no, the fluid will just stay right where it is. It now becomes a completely sealed unit and the fluid can't go anywhere. You can't compress fluid, right?
But it's still be pressurized.
It still has pressure on it, but how much pressure would it have? Well, it's dependent upon the design of what? The master cylinder, right? If the master cylinder develops 30 pounds per square inch, okay? Then 30 pounds per square inch of fluid will come through the brake line and push against the piston, and hence the cup and then the piston. What happens if this thing is stuck? What if this thing is stuck so hard that it requires 100 pounds per square inch to move it? The fluid wouldn't go anywhere. Okay? And there's no way to increase pedal pressure if this master cylinder is designed to only create 30 pounds per square inch, right? So the only way you can repair it or overcome that problem is to repair it. Okay, very quickly. What's another symptom of a bad wheel cell? Leak. Okay? All you have to do is when you take the brake drum off, just like you did, Bobby, on that Mustang, pull back the boot, and what are you looking for? Fluid. Fluid. If there's fluid inside this dust cover, what's happening? Right? Oh, yes. Fluid is running past the piston or the what? The cup, going to the outside, and the only thing that's keeping that fluid then from going all over the place is this cover. All right? So there's primarily two symptoms. One's a visual symptom. You have to take the drum off and look at it, just like they do at an inspection station. You have to take the drum off, look at the dust cover, pull it back, and make sure there's no fluid there. The other symptom, and hence diagnosis, then would be both visual and a feeling kind of thing. You could have someone gently apply the brakes, and what are you going to do? Look for it.
Look at the piston.
Right. Look at the pins, the actuating pins, and see if they both do what, John? Mike.
Move at the same time.
Move at the same time. If one is moving and the other is not, what's wrong? What's possibly wrong?
One of the pistons is very stuck.
One of the pistons is corroded or stuck. Exactly right. Okay? Tomorrow, I'm going to show you, and you'll all have an opportunity on the bench to disassemble a wheel cylinder. Okay? Or I should say Monday, excuse me. Lost track of time. We'll disassemble a wheel cylinder, and I'll show you various things that you would want to look for in terms of repair of a wheel cylinder. However, today, quickly review. Construction. Tell me something, David, about the construction of the wheel cylinder. Externally, tell me something about it.
That's inside.
Well, the outside of it. There's a bleed screw. Bobby, what else? What's it made of? Cast iron. Okay. It's not generally made of what? Aluminum? Correct. Internally, we have some basic components. John, what are they? They have the piston, right? Mr. Call, what else? The actuating pin, which may come in contact with what, Mike?
Brake shoe.
The brake shoe. What else do we have inside? We have the sealing cup, right? The return spring, or positioning spring, whichever you want to call it. And one other little device that isn't... Pardon me?
Divider.
No, not divider. Look on your sheet. Cup expander, right? Fits in behind the wheel cylinder cup, yes.
Fluid.
Fluid, absolutely critical to its operation, right? And one other component, the dust boot, okay? Take a moment, and on this illustration that I've passed out to you, make sure you write in these components' names. They're all illustrated here, but they're not all identified. I mean, they're all drawn here, but they're not all identified. Take your drawing, and identify those components. Monday, we will have a quiz on this material. Okay? Test on the wheel cylinder. Right? Also in summary, what did we forget? It's critical. Brake line. Yes. Brake line coming in. And the diagnosis then of a problem, we talked about two malfunctions. What are they? Bill? The piston getting jammed inside the wheel cylinder housing either due to corrosion or rust. What else? And leak to the outside. Any questions? Make sure again you identify the components on your handout. Mike?
On this handout, it's kind of hard to see the dust.
Okay, the dust boot is always on the outside portion or covers the outside portion of the wheel cylinder. Okay, the bleed screw. Okay, draw it in. Draw the bleed screw in. And try to put it centrally located to the wheel cylinder. After class, come up and take a look at this so you have a better idea. Any more questions?
And bolt directly to the back.
Yes, it does bolt directly to the back. And one other thing that's not critical to it, some cars, many years ago, you won't find it today, use two of these per wheel. One for each brake shoe. Simply that. But you will not find that. You'll have to go back to a car that's 40 years old, and I'm sure you will not be working with that kind of thing out in the real world. Okay? Any other questions? We've run out of time. Thank you.